elevating the discussion while talking about the things that matter most. You're listening to Society and the State, Life, Liberty, and Your Pursuit of Happiness. Now, your hosts, Connor Boyack and Bryan Hyde.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining us on one of our early, exciting episodes here of the new podcast. Thank you for joining us, and we're excited, really excited to talk to Matt Phillips. Matt is someone who I had the pleasure of meeting very recently. I was invited to go out and speak at a conference called Pork Fest out in New Hampshire. It was the first time I had ever been. Matt was the guy in charge, and it's connected to this organization he's going to be talking about today called the Free State Project, of which Matt here is the president. So welcome, Matt. Thanks for joining us.
It's great to be here.
Let me, Bryan has a lot of questions because this is such an interesting topic, but, a lot of our listeners may understand what you're up to, but I imagine for a lot, this idea of the Free State Project is rather new. So why don't you kind of give us an introductory insight into what it is that you guys are doing and why it's important?
Sure. So if you are a libertarian like we are, and you're interested in trying to reduce the size and scope of government, there's a lot of different options that are available to you. You can try running for office. You can try, lobbying the existing office holders of legislature to try and implement some of your, ideas and policies around reducing taxes or lowering, regulations that apply to businesses. But if you're living in a state like, New York or New Jersey or California or really almost anywhere, or in most countries around the world too, it's really hard to make any progress on that. So a gentleman by the name of Jason Sorens, about 15 years ago, actually longer now, in 2001, he wrote an article where he said, hey, libertarians, instead of losing all the time everywhere around the country and around the world, why don't we try to focus our efforts by moving to one low population U.S. state and see if in doing that we can't actually get enough influence and voice to convince people that it's worth trying this experiment. And so he did that, and some other folks kind of took the idea and ran with it, came up with a list of 10 low population U.S. states, got 5,000 people to sort of sign up and say, yeah, I'll move to whatever state we pick. There was a vote, and New Hampshire was chosen in 2003 as the target destination state for this Free State Project. And so the goal was to get 20,000 people to agree to move within 5 years of hitting that 20,000 number. 20,000 being sort of a back of the envelope calculation of how many people it would take in a state with a population of, 1 to 1.5 million people.
Sure.
to actually shift the conversation.
Make an impact.
And to have an impact, and not just through direct action and activism, although we're doing that, but also just through the conversations that we have with our friends and our neighbors and our colleagues and the other parents of the, where our kids go to school, letters to the editor, all of that. And so fast forward now to today, 2017, and last year we got the 20,000 signers, people who pledged to move within 5 years, but already over the last, 14 years, 2,100 people have moved, in advance of hitting that 20,000 number. Plus, we've got over 2,500 people who already lived here in the state of New Hampshire who signed the same statement of intent to say, yes, we want to work towards the creation of a society in which the role of government is smaller. And so as part of our efforts to recruit more signers, but also from that list of the remaining 18,000 people who've pledged to move, we hold 2 annual events every year. So in the winter, we've got Liberty Forum that's here in Manchester. And then in the June, near the end of June, we have what's called Pork Fest. Officially, it's the Porcupine Freedom Festival. and it's held in Lancaster, New Hampshire. And generally, it's between 1,000 and 1,500 people every year. And it's a chance for people who are interested in this idea and they want to find out more, they want to experience the community, to come and meet a bunch of us and check out the state and drive around and maybe see what would be involved in moving. And it's really a good way, as you saw last week because you were there, that it's a fantastic way to meet the community and get a sense of what we're all about and what we're trying to do here.
So I have a question for you, Matt.
Yeah.
It's easy to give lip service to wanting to live free. I think most people, if you ask them, hey, is freedom a good idea? They're going to nod their heads. Oh, yeah, definitely. But to actually move, to actually, put it into action, takes a little something more. What are the excuses people give both for participating in the Free State Project and more importantly, what are some of the excuses you hear for people who say, I can't do that?
That's a great question. So, the people that actually end up making the move are the people who, often they have tried to do some kind of activism in wherever it is that they're coming from and found that it's just not effective or possible. They're used to going to meetups of libertarians, even in large cities, and it ends up being, 6 people. And, most of those people don't actually do anything. They're just interested in sort of talking about it and hanging out with other libertarians. So mostly it's that they've had some experience with trying to make a difference, been frustrated, and decided, looked around to say, how do I potentially do a better job at this? They come across the Free State Project. Plenty of people move sight unseen, but lots of people will take several years and they'll come and visit several times, and then they'll sort of understand, hey, if I really want to do something meaningful, with purpose, I have to be there among all those other libertarians in order to get something done. The people that don't move, either yet or ever, weather is a big one. A lot of people say, oh, I couldn't possibly move there. It's too cold during the winter. And I get that if you're just the kind of person, you live in LA and you just can't deal with it,
Sure.
Okay, that's fine. But I will say that the winter is, it's more mild than a lot of places in the northern US, right? I mean, if you go a little farther to the west, you get to places like Buffalo, New York, where the winters are far worse. And you go from there all the way over to like Montana, even eastern Washington and Oregon, winters are pretty bad. And you look around the world and it's like, Copenhagen, Moscow, Beijing, all these places have worse winters than we do. Well, plus we've got tons of, like you have in Utah there, we got lots of fun winter activities, skiing, snowmobiling, hunting, lots of different things to do during the winter.
Matt, I think you pointed out, right, that a lot of people want the social comfort or benefit of being around other people like them. And whether, whatever your political persuasion, religious persuasion, I think that's something we all resonate with, right? We want people with commonalities that we can relate to and interact with. And so that part resonates with me, right? It makes sense why people of a perhaps minority political outlook would want to be able to identify with other people. Obviously, the internet facilitates that. So virtually, we're all in Facebook groups or online with people who are like us. But there's something different about sitting around a fire, or going to the bar or whatever it is with people who are like you. But to me, that's the minority of the proposition of what the Free State Project is, as I understand it, as this outsider. To me, it's more about affecting change. So talk to me a little bit about some of the change that has been affected as a result of all of these people moving to New Hampshire. I understand that the legislature has a lot of more libertarian people now, in part as a result of your efforts. What type of results are you seeing?
So that's a really good point. And I think that, the whole premise of the project is to make change. But that being, and there is a lot of good change, and I'll talk about that in just a minute. But I think that it's hard to overvalue the power and the comfort that comes from this community. Like, even if we never get a single law repealed or a single tax reduced, just the fact that you can come and live here and be amongst these like-minded individuals and hang out with them really on a regular basis. As often as you really want to. You could do it every day if you wanted to. There's a meetup somewhere in the state going on. to be able to hang out with those people, even to not talk about politics, just to talk about the movie you saw last night, or, raising your kids, or, what you're doing at work, whatever you want to talk about, being able to talk about that in this, with these other people who share your same value set and your same, foundational philosophy of how our society ought to be organized is really powerful. And that's part of what we try to do with the events, is give people a taste of that. But that said, there's plenty of things that we actually are doing. I mean, just this year alone, we have had a tremendous number of legislative and other activism wins, including constitutional carry, meaning that you can now carry a concealed firearm without a permit, which isn't to say it wasn't difficult before. There's a bill to decriminalize cannabis, 3/4 of an ounce or less, to turn it into a misdemeanor. That's sitting on the governor's desk right now. He promised to sign it during the campaign last year. We've expanded medical cannabis to the number of maladies or afflictions that qualify for getting your medical cannabis card. We deregulated cryptocurrency, so the legislator made it very clear that cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin and Ethereum should not be regulated by the banking department here in the state. We repealed the occupational license for hair braiding, which for anyone who studies this issue, African Americans who want to get their hair braided, they have to do it. But somebody who's doing that has to pass the same licensing test that cosmetologists pass, in order to do a wide variety of borderline medical activities, just to braid hair. Legalized small fireworks, which last week has been interesting. We just legalized a needle exchange. The whole country is having an opioid crisis. It's pretty bad here in New Hampshire too. And a really interesting one that just passed is this Croydon school choice bill, so that towns without public schools can now elect to send their kids to private schools that are in town, and the town will pay for it. And that saves the town a lot of money, potentially gets the kids a better education. It means they don't have to travel so far. And I think that's just the tip of the iceberg as far as education reform. As far as education reform goes.
That's a long list of successes.
That's just so far this year.
Okay. So, and you've been going now for what, 15 years or close to it?
Yeah.
Tell me about the opposition, because I know that no matter where you live, you're going to encounter a sort of old guard that, this is the way things have always been done and we want to keep things the way they've been done. Where does the opposition to the Free State Project and some of the policies that you've just mentioned, where do you see that primarily? Are you winning over members of the old guard?
So it's interesting. The old guard here, is the reason why we picked New Hampshire in the first place. It's the live free or die state. There's a really strong, inherent libertarian culture here of you leave me alone and I'll leave you alone and we'll get along just fine. It's that flinty Yankee kind of spirit. And so it's not the old guard that doesn't like us. In fact, many of them, once they sort of grok what we're doing, consider us to be reinforcements. It's the new guard of the creeping, what we have here is creeping Massachusettsification of, liberals and progressives who feel like Massachusetts has been ruined and they move up here, but then vote for all of the same, social programs and onerous regulations that are afflicting Massachusetts. So mostly it's the newer, the younger, the liberal, progressive, the Democrats, but mostly it's also just it's people who are politically aware, which, as you know, isn't a large percentage of the population. Most people that I talk to here in New Hampshire, they don't really know. And when I tell them kind of what we're doing, they're like, okay, right on, live free or die, man. So it's mostly on the Democrats and the progressive activists that sort of know what we're doing and really don't like it because they know that we're fighting against, we're pretty diametrically opposed to what they're doing. Although that said, some of the things that we fight for, we find allies on the left. When it comes to things like privacy or the drug war, they happily, tag along for those victories, even though in more of the sort of right, the right wing conservative issues like gun rights and religious freedom, they're opposed.
Matt, let me ask you this question because it dovetails precisely with what you just said a moment ago about finding allies. My perception, and I'd like your reaction, whether you agree or disagree and why, is that everyone is libertarian, at least on a few things. Right? Like you say libertarian, and I wonder if, some people tuned off this episode because they're like, oh, I'm a liberal, I'm a conservative or whatever. But do you agree with the perception that I have, and that is that everyone is pretty libertarian on a few, or even a lot of things?
I absolutely agree with that. And in fact, I think most people are libertarian on about half of the issues, whether that's more of the social end of things or more of the fiscal end of things. Libertarianism is often described, and I'm not a huge fan of this phrase, but, fiscally responsible and socially tolerant. So yeah, we find allies with, the Republicans or the right on things about, money, and allies with the left on things about social issues and causes. Generally speaking, there's some exceptions. But I think if everybody took the smallest political quiz in the world, everyone generally scores at least a 50%. And I think it's actually maybe even higher than that. I think Cato published some research recently about trying to figure out how many libertarians there actually are out there. And, the estimates come in somewhere between, 25 and 40% of everyone, if they stop and think about it and learn about it, realize that they're basically libertarian.
Matt, let me ask you a follow-up question on that. From my observation at PorcFest recently when I was there, seeing a bunch of kids running around, do you think that libertarianism is family-friendly?
Well, I absolutely do. I mean, certainly that's our experience up here, as you saw. I think that we often say, we're going to have to breed our way out of this. But I think especially when it comes to things like school choice, a big part of what we do and why we do it is because of the kids, right?
Think of the children, right?
Yeah, but who will think of the children? Okay. Well, we're the ones that don't want to put them into these, one size fits all government indoctrination, camps commonly known as public schools. We're the ones that want every kid to have, an opportunity to get an individualized education that matches their natural abilities and their interests and their talents and the pace at which they learn and the style in which they learn. So I think absolutely libertarian is very family friendly and very, very child friendly. And the fact that it is a philosophy of personal responsibility I think matches very well with what I think every parent would want their kid to learn.
So tell me this, Matt, for a person to really exercise their liberty, that personal responsibility means that they have to be willing to sweat or otherwise have some discomfort at some level. How much discomfort should a person be willing to suffer for his or her liberty?
Well, they definitely should be willing to, endure the cold New Hampshire winters when they move here,
right.
for liberty. That's a very individual question. And, I think there's this sort of concept of virtue libertarianism where it's like, yes, I believe that you ought to have the right to do drugs and have sex with who you want to and listen to rock and roll music. But if that's all you're doing, then, that's fine. That's your choice. But is that really a fulfilling lifestyle for you? Is that something that you will get to the end of your life and look back and not have regrets? I think it's up to each person, each individual to figure out what makes them happy. But, I think the things in life that are truly fulfilling, and the philosophers have been saying this for thousands of years, is when you find something with a bigger purpose and a broader meaning, and you really get into it, in a really deep way, and you try to make some progress and try to make the world a better place. So, that's what I'm doing here. I moved here about 4 years ago, and that's what a lot of the people here, have moved. It's not just because they want to be able to, sit on the couch and smoke weed all day. It's because they see that, the regulations and the laws about marijuana are used by the state to ruin people's lives and reduce their humanity and their opportunity to flourish and thrive.
Well, to me, Matt, one of the ironic things about Free State Project is it's addressing the ignorant complaint that is often lodged by other people in various parts of the world, where they'll say, well, if you don't like it, why don't you just leave? Right. To which people in your organization are saying, yeah, okay.
Right, exactly. Well, we did, and now we're here. Yeah, that's definitely, if you don't like it, or if you don't like it, why don't you do something about it? It's like, well, here we actually have a framework for people to do something about it. And it's not just the Free State Project either. And the FSP is a 501c3 nonprofit, but we're just focused on getting people here. Once you're here, then, you can live where you want. You can do what you want. There's a lot of other individuals and organizations that are working on things. The New Hampshire Liberty Alliance, for example, does more of the legislative, lobbying and activities.
Sure.
But for each individual, issue, whether it's, firearms or marijuana or, health, whatever, there's somebody or some organization that I can point you to and say, well, you should go talk to that person. They're the one that have been working on this for a while and, know a lot of the ins and outs of the issues and where different legislators stand on it, who are the other players and actors. So there's a really a rich, diverse ecosystem here of activists and activism that facilitates that process by which we are making change, and we're going to continue to make a lot of change.
Matt, let's assume that this conversation has struck the right nerve in some of the people who are listening to it. How do they get more information? Where would you send them?
So I would definitely say start with our website, freestateproject.org. There's also a lot of us are on Facebook, so look for a Facebook group called Free State Project, or also our page. But really the best way to do it, you can start there, but in order to really get a better sense of what we're doing here, you got to come visit for one of our events. And if that happens to be one of our big annual events, fantastic. But if you happen to be up in the Northeast at some point and you want to jag up here and take a look, just let us know and we'll point you to some meetup that's happening somewhere around the state, and you can go and meet a bunch of us.
I think that's great, Matt. I spoke at two different sessions at Pork Fest, and my observation from being there and interacting, especially afterwards with the Q&A, was that people are very friendly. There's a great sense of camaraderie and community. I saw, there's a real estate group that helps people who are relocating to New Hampshire to, find places to live, to kind of help gain that foothold and establish that community. And I think that was, super beneficial. It was a very inviting and warm experience, seeing kids running around and seeing families there and just people supporting and enjoying one another's company while, talking about the issues and learning and strategizing. So kudos to you guys. All those websites, we will link to our show notes page on societyandthestate.com/4. You are lucky number 4 here. Matt, thanks again for joining us. This has been very insightful, and we really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much. It was great to be here.
You've been listening to Society and the State. For show notes, archives, and more great content, visit societyandthestate.com.